We're going to give folks a few more minutes, and I was going to ask you if you could hear me, but I can hear myself, so we're in good shape. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So if all those folks that are whispering in the corner there could, no, I'm just kidding. Welcome to the end of year joint evaluation process refinement session. We're going to go through a couple of introductions and then set the stage and kind of give you a preview of what we're going to do. But my name is Tim Wilhite. I'm a project officer in the tribal section, and I work with tribes in far northern California. And I think I was recruited to this task here because I'm the worst in the world for end of years. And I'll let some people that are the best in the world introduce themselves because we've got it covered here.
Hello, everyone. Nico Anderson, GAP Project Officer. Also be presenting on this end of year initiative that we have. And I cannot claim to be a master at end of years. That's why we've actually all gotten you into the room. So we're going to ask for your participation in just a little bit. But did you guys want to introduce yourself shortly? Just great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Romero, and I am one of the GAP work group co-leads and the environmental director for the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. And I know Carrie will mention this too. We really need tribal input on the end of year process. So you'll understand shortly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming after lunch. Carrie Vera with the Tule River Tribe. I'm also one of the GAP work group co-leads, which along with Teresa, and also Central California rep as well. So yeah, we're looking forward to hearing from you guys. So feel free to speak up.
Hi, I'm Willard Chin, GAP Project Officer.
Hello, and I'm Abigail Gamet. You can call me Abby, and I'm also a GAP project officer.
All righty, let's get started.
All right, so we want to just kind of tell you what you're in for today, just to kind of set the stage so that you know what's going to happen. But we're going to go through the background and introduction or the intention of why we're here today. take you through a little reporting and evaluation 101 just to kind of tune it up and get you guys in the groove of what reporting is all about. We're going to talk about the current process and what we might do to improve it. We're going to overview the regs so that people know that when we're asking questions about how could we improve the process, you know that we have a regulatory box that we have to work in, but that box, we think there's room to work in it. And we'll talk about best management practices for end of year evaluations. And then we're going to break you. And we probably should lock the doors now when we're going to tell you guys this, but we're going to break you out into small groups and actually get some information from you and get your thoughts. And that's really our biggest motive today, is to get some input from you guys. And we're going to invite you to join the end of year committee. So first of all, how many people know what a GAP end of year process is in the audience? Okay, all right. So basically, tribes are required to provide 4 progress reports per year. And at the end of the year, project officers look at those reports and write a joint evaluation draft. And we basically characterize the tribe's success at completing the work plan. And we share that with the tribes, or the folks we work with, and they get to correct any mistakes that we made on it and suggest things that they'd like to see in the report. And when the project officers and environmental directors or whoever are okay with it, we package that thing and we ship it off to the chair. And that's what a joint evaluation is. We thought, the EPA thought maybe it's time that we look at improving the process. And we didn't want to do that alone, because what we realized is that maybe originally when we designed the process, tribes weren't really at the table as much as we'd like them to be. And so we have a couple of folks here on the RTOC GAP work group, Teresa and Carrie. And so they're the tribal side of the equation, and Nico is kind of carrying the ball for us. Ruben is technically on that work group, but Nico is actually carrying the ball and doing most of the stuff. So that's why you see these particular people in the room. So anyway, the bottom line today is that we want to start the conversation. What can we do different to make it easier, more diagnostic, and so forth? So the GAP RTOC work group is going to create an end of year joint evaluation committee, and we're going to focus exclusively on reporting and end of year processes. All right, so the basics of reporting, just to tune you up. And I was surprised that some of you didn't raise your hand and you haven't been through an end of year process before. So we have some new blood, so we'll probably get some really fresh thinking on this. But reporting is required by the regs, and we're going to have to work inside that box, but we think it's a big box. The reports, you know, they just basically document what transpired throughout the year, whether or not you got your work plan task accomplished, got your deliverables in, what challenges you had, what changes you might have to make on your budgets and things like that. We identify lessons learned. We can, once in a while, you guys can alert us to things that you need help with, and we can go shop for you and try to get some technical assistance. And you always do reporting for multiple audiences, not just for the EPA, and we realize that. So you guys also report to your council. I'm sure your council wants to know as much about what you're doing as we do, and for the public record. So like I kind of alluded to, we went back and we thought about this. In particular, it was Nico that brought it up at one of our staff meetings, as I recall. And he said, the regs are saying that the joint evaluation should be designed between the tribes and the EPA. Did we do that originally? And we thought about it, and perhaps we didn't have as much tribal input as we should have when it all started. So this is our opportunity to get tribes in and to get some fresh thinking. Our templates and the way we do it are very quantitative. You know, you guys give us an estimated cost for your work plan activities. We call them commitments in the work plan. And at the end of the year, if you completed a certain activity and it was valued at $2,000 originally in your work plan, you get $2,000 worth of credit. And at the end of the bottom of the column, if you were awarded $100,000 and you got $100,000 of work completed, it's a piece of cake in the year. And we put in the report some complimentary things about the staff and the work that they did, and we move on. That's the easy ones. Sometimes if you didn't get all the work done, it takes a little bit longer. But anyway, we're humans, right? And we do really good things all the time, and we rarely focus on the good things that we do. What do we zero in on, all humans? We zero in on the things that we didn't do well. And we think maybe we're putting a little too much emphasis on that. And so we're going to try to possibly change that. So a little bit of perspective. So why are we rethinking this? And we just want to let you guys know that it's not like we feel there's an emergency or anything. We just think it's a great opportunity. We have a super GAP work group with Teresa and Carrie, and Nico has been wanting to rethink this. So all the right players are at the table. These processes are fairly efficient for most tribes because honestly, most tribes provide their reports and just about everything's done. And all the project officer has to do is kind of rubber stamp a nice complimentary end of year process that the directors agree with, and we ship it off to the chair. But like I said, we have an opportunity to rethink it. It's about time. And there's no big hurry. The important thing is that we get it done, and we get it done with tribal input. And like I said, we want the reports to be kind of valuable. And if they haven't been valuable in the past, we want to know from you guys' perspective why they weren't valuable. I'll turn this part over to Nico. It's the fun part.
All right, thanks, Tim. Yeah, they gave me the fun job of covering the regulations. So, normally regulations can be really dense. I'll speak personally. I think they're dense and they're boring and they're confusing. But as we started to dig in a little bit more, and you'll see right here, there are some regulations that are crystal clear. And luckily for this initiative, 35.515 is one of those regulations. So, and the reason, and I think Tim alluded to this, that we're covering the regulations is because this is essentially the box that we have to work in. So whatever new process we come up with, it still has to abide by these regulations. And oftentimes regulations are too strict, and they don't allow us to do what we actually want to do. In this particular situation, we were kind of surprised that the regulations, and I'm going to go through a couple of them just real quick, outlined almost what we were trying to achieve. So we were really surprised and encouraged by the regulations. And I would just like to say that this initiative is supported by EPA management at present. And so we have to abide by the regulations. But once we do that, the sky is kind of the limit. And so we really want, folks to start thinking as creatively as possible, as long as it's within the regulations. So, and I think just to reiterate the goal here, it's that we come up with a process that's jointly developed, which is meeting these regulations, and that is ultimately more fair and more valuable to both the tribe and EPA. So at present, and just to get a show of hands, who has participated in an end of year evaluation process? Okay, so we've got a few. That's great. Yeah, we want all of the time that goes into this, and that includes reporting. So all of quarterly reporting, all of responding to EPA's comments, the joint evaluation, all of that time, we want it to be worthwhile. So just to get into, this particular, this is like subpart A of this regulation. it clearly states that the applicant and the regional administrator will develop a process for jointly evaluating and reporting progress and accomplishments under the work plan. So this is the first thing I read when I dug into this, and I was like, I don't think we're doing this. So that started this whole thing. And in this case, just, there's always some room for interpretation, but the applicant, obviously the tribe, and then the regional administrator, in this case, is sort of delegated to the regional tribal program office, and then by extension, the project officer. So it would be the environmental director at the tribe working with the GAP project officer to come up with a process, jointly develop a process. It also says the description of the evaluation process and reporting schedule must be included in the work plan. Those of you who have GAP work plans can think about whether or not that process is in there. And then it says as well, the schedule must require the recipient to report at least annually and must satisfy the requirements for progress reporting under this other regulation. So I'll just pause there for a second, let people think whether or not they're meeting this requirement in the regs of reporting at least annually. And so I just want to state that we're not suggesting here that, tribes shouldn't be reporting quarterly or as frequently as they are. That is often, a term and condition in the award. So a term and condition, different than a regulation. And until that term and condition is changed, progress reporting would still have to be quarterly. You still have to abide by the term and condition, but term and conditions can be changed and modified. Regulations cannot be, or it's at least a lot more difficult. So let's see. And then, let me go on to part B. Okay, so these are the required elements of the evaluation process. A discussion of accomplishments as measured against work plan commitments, a discussion of the cumulative effectiveness of the work performed under all work plan components, a discussion of existing and potential problem areas, and suggestions for improvement, right? Including schedules for making improvements. So again, those environmental directors that have been part of this process, you guys can think, does this accurately describe the end of year joint evaluation process you're familiar with? Just, you don't have to answer, just think about it. And for some of you, it may be yes, and for others, maybe not so much. So we want to address that, if not. And part of this, as we were reading this, we got kind of excited. We're like, oh, there's an emphasis on discussions. There's an emphasis on accomplishments, and there's an emphasis on suggestions for improvement, which was exactly what we set out to do, which is to make a process that is more qualitative than quantitative and is more solution-oriented than otherwise, or more punitive. And so the regulations kind of spelled out the process that we already had in mind that we were trying to achieve. And then we continued reading, and there is a subpart C, but it's not all that relevant. And then subpart D are the evaluation reports. So it does say that the RA will ensure that their required evaluations are performed according to the schedule, and that copies of the evaluation reports are placed in the official files and provided to the recipient. So at first look, as we were going through subpart A through C, there was no mention of a report. And then we got to subpart D and we were like, oh, okay, there is a report that is required. And that's not to say we don't want a report. Reports can be incredibly valuable. They can capture what transpired, and the challenges that were encountered, and also, solutions. But whether or not the reports at present are doing that is in question. So let's see. Oh, I guess let me go back real quick. Let me just start by saying, there is no rush to this process. So a subcommittee has not been formed yet. There is no timeline for coming up with a new process. And so for the time being, whatever process and agreement you have in place with your project officer is likely to continue until the subcommittee is formed and we come up with a new process. So we wanted to provide everybody with just a few reminders and best practices as you, especially for the environmental directors, as you begin the joint evaluation process every single year, just so that you're aware of your own rights and roles and expectations in that process. And we have slides for both POs, because we are actively training project officers on how to engage in this process in the meantime. And we encourage all of you to remind project officers of your rights and some of these best management practices in that process, if you feel like they're not abiding by them. So just real quick, here are some best management practices for project officers to discuss the end of year process with each grantee, before that process begins. So in the tribal branch meeting earlier, Ruben outlined or talked about the coaching calls that they would be, approaching. So that's an opportunity for you to have these conversations with your GAP project officer. What the end of year process, what kind of end of year process you would like. And so until one is established, I think it's fair game for you to discuss this with your individual GAP project officer and say, I think this is fair and this is what I would like to do. And it should be a discussion. And then make sure that that's captured in the work plan that is ultimately approved. Ensure that the reporting schedule and description are in the work plan, communicate and schedule check-in calls according to that agreement, ask grantees about needed work plan or budget modifications throughout the year. So this is something that, veteran environmental directors are aware of, as well as GAP project officers. But for new environmental directors, you can revise a work plan at any time during the year and as many times as needed throughout the year. And so oftentimes after that work plan gets approved, folks think that that's a contract and it's been locked in place. That is not the case. You can simply request modification of your project officer. You can update them on costs. Say this commitment took more time than anticipated. This actually cost more money. And just communicate that to your GAP PO and they'll let you know whether or not a modification is necessary. So in the past, everyone wasn't aware of that and they were being held to the original work plan that was approved. So just make sure you communicate changes to your GAP project officer and that if they're significant enough, those work plan and budget modifications get approved. And then allow grantees to highlight their own accomplishments for the final report sent to council. So these end of years are sent to council. And we want to make sure that we are capturing in the summary or the narrative portion of that end of year all of the accomplishments that you have made throughout the year. Oftentimes you'll get this report and it's kind of boilerplate language and there's this spreadsheet that's attached with a whole bunch of different numbers. And, as Tim mentioned, we'll fixate, or council will, or environmental directors will, on those that weren't completed. So it's like, these were all completed, but which commitments weren't completed? And so we want to make sure that even though we may be doing that, we're highlighting accomplishments and successes as well. And then these are some best management practices for grantees. So again, modify work plans and budgets as often as necessary. And although we are encouraging GAP project officers to remind you of that, and whether they're in quarterly check-ins, it is ultimately your prerogative to, let us know when work plan changes are needed. Again, when activities take more time and effort, and so there are costs associated with that. And grantees, Ruben in the tribal session earlier mentioned that we will draft the sort of initial report and send to you for concurrence. You can always challenge, you can always add additional information, and you can always say, yes, but, this happened. It's better to do a work plan modification throughout the year. But if you don't, and you get to the end of your process, you can inform us that, okay, we didn't get this activity completed, but we did this instead. Or we don't have this deliverable to submit, but we have this one instead. And so work with your project officer and defend the work that you did. And then also to perform a self-assessment. And so instead of waiting, and this is optional, but instead of waiting to see what the GAP project officer is going to come up with, after reviewing all of your quarterly reports and how much money was spent and coming to their own conclusion, you can preempt that with your own evaluation. You can say this commitment was completed, 75%, or we think that we completed it 100% for these particular reasons. So just provide some context that only you have and a justification, and that will help us make a determination. And I think that's it. So what we really want to do now is break folks into small groups. Don't go running. Don't go running. Doors are locked. We really want folks to think creatively and openly. And even if you are not an environmental director and you don't have experience in the end of year evaluation process, that's also good. We want your ideas on what an evaluation between EPA and tribes should look like of work accomplished. And so we've got a few questions that we're gonna get to. But Carrie and what's that? I think so. Would you like to? Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna hand it over to Carrie just real quick.
I'm just going to make it, I don't know if I'm supposed to get up here. Just really, really quick, and I know we kind of went over this already, but just to kind of let you guys know how this rolled out, is this really developed from EPA wanting to make these improvements. But our role here as the GAP work group is to bring tribes in. I mean, there needs to be the input from tribes to really make this improved. And we're in a great season right now when we've got EPA staff that's really willing to do that, to open the door and say, tribes, please tell us, give us your input. So that's kind of where we're at. And I just wanted to highlight the importance of reporting from a tribal perspective. So it's of course, following the regulations and making sure that we're justifying our funds that were spent, but it's also really about painting our success stories, because at some point that gets floated up all the way to Congress. At some point, who's giving the money to the region and then to tribes. And so this is an opportunity to improve those success stories on behalf of tribes, that we get funding into the future, maybe additional funding. So that's kind of where we're at from the tribal side. So it's good to see more faces coming in. And Willard's going to explain the activity right now.
Yes, this is the fun part, and really the most productive part. We're going to get a chance to hear some really great ideas from people in the room. So we're going to have small group discussions. We've kind of allocated about 25 minutes. So we're going to break out into small groups. In a few seconds, we'll flash 5 questions on the screen. We also have handouts with these 5 questions that each of the group will have. So please, talk amongst yourself. Ideally, we want you to try to answer all 5 questions, individually. You will have, pieces of paper that you could write your responses to these 5 questions. At the end of the sessions, we will be collecting, all what you write up on your summary and your responses to the questions. We'll gather all these responses and give it to the RTalk work group. So, and please, if there are new people, listen and learn from the people who've done the end of year process. You could ask some of the hard questions and some of the challenges. So ideally, we want you to answer all 5 questions, but if in fact there's a particular question that you want to pay more attention on and you want to just focus on a few of those questions, that would be great. But I think we've allocated enough time for everybody to go through all 5 questions. So at the end of the group discussion, we will have a report out, meaning that we want people to kind of maybe designate a spokesperson the group. And identify one or two, good ideas you want to share from your group. So we kind of have an understanding, of a preview of some of the great ideas. Again, we're going to get all of these information and give it to the RTOC work group, but there will be a chance for a report out from, so please, maybe find a volunteer from each of the group. For the folks who are participating online, please, I believe there are 3 people online. We will have you input into the chat box. And this is Willard. I'm using Alexis's computer, so I will be interacting with you via chat, and I will be doing the report out for the people in the chat. So yeah. So and I'm gonna. You want to say? Yeah. So yeah, let's maybe count. Yeah.
I just say, like, just to simplify things, wherever you're seated, like we could have one group in that corner, one group kind of over here, one group in the back. So wherever you're closest to, and we can have another group here, just kind of move in that direction. And well, I know there's a bunch of people back there, but hopefully we have like 4, even groups. I just want to clarify that all of the responses are anonymous. So you don't have to write your name on any of the sheets of paper. It would be really helpful if you identified with we're going to flash the questions. They're pretty easy and open-ended, which question you're responding to. So per sheet, just put the number of the question and write your idea. We'll be walking around if you guys have any clarifying, or any questions. Right. Okay, ready, go.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, that's loud. I'll talk softer. We want you to finish up, and so that your groups can report out, we'll give you another minute or so.
Yeah, that was your warning, but please also assign the number to your responses so we can track your responses, please. Yeah, thank you.
And also, I know this is, I mean, we're kind of in, I don't want to stop you guys, but always feel free to email us with extra thoughts. Like you think of something later, our emails are going to be at the final slide. So you guys can always reach out.
And one final thing, I know it's on your sheet, so you may already be answering it, but it's like the most important question. This one right here. So if you are interested in joining a subcommittee, and we think it'll only require an hour or two a month, please on one of the sheets of paper, just write your name and your contact information, and we'll be in touch with you. Thank you.
Hi, all. We need you to finish up now. We only have 5 minutes left. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we'll go around. Abby, do you want to start maybe in that corner?
So, sorry to cut off the conversation, but hopefully, yeah, no, that's okay. You still have the opportunity here. If you want to maybe designate someone that can give a few thoughts.
I'll do the first one.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Josephina from the Colorado River Indian Tribes, and we were discussing question 1. And what we came up with was when EPA has a turnover with project officers, there's the old project officer has their way of how they coordinate with the tribe to get their end of year done. And when they transition into a new project officer, of course, they have their way of operating. And so when the tribe is trying to close out the end of year, there's 2 different ways of the EPA project officer wanting the end of year done. And so I think if the old project officer were to discuss with the new project officer the way they've been managing the end of year for the tribe, then that would make it easier on the tribe to deliver their end of year report. And then that new project officer can get with the tribe like, okay, I'm new and this is the way I want to coordinate with you for this upcoming year versus, like this is how I want to coordinate it. And it's making it tough to close out that year. I think they should just coordinate with each other, find a better, way of being able to be on the same page for the tribe to close out that year and then start the new year with the new project officer and how they want to work with that tribe for the upcoming years.
Oh, thank you. I agree completely. So thank you for that suggestion. That's one of the reasons why we're, starting this initiative. It's because we want to standardize the response. It's one of the things that we've heard from grantees over the years is that, each PO does things very differently. And it's hard to manage that when expectations are different. So that's one of the things we're going to accomplish. Yes, we will note that. So before a new process is established, that's a practice that we can start implementing, that new project officers are brought on to calls and are, informed of their, the old departing project officers' ways of doing business. And so to reiterate it again, when you guys are, start your coaching calls with your project officer, be them old or new, have these conversations about the end of year process and let them know how you'd like the end of year process to go down as well. So on the tribal section, we can definitely get better and making sure that transition is smooth and there's not that large of a jump between project officers. But just as a reminder for everyone, let your preferences be known to your project officer before the process starts. Possible. So thank you for your comment. It's really good.
Someone in this group, or maybe sharing
Next group.
one or two of like the more
Jeremy for this stuff, man. Yes, the one. So the group had strong opinion. Yeah, sure. We had strong opinions on like two of these, but question one, just understanding the process of like how to go through it, like, is very important. And once you understand the process, it's very easy to work within because it's end of year. You've already done everything. So it's kind of like a retroactive look at it. It's communicating early. It's like a quarterly check-in. So like you don't so you front load the work instead of doing everything at the end, because it's a lot easier to like change or argue your point. Like how much work was done or what you accomplished that way. And yeah, it's standardizing. It would be wonderful because personalities between project officers vary immensely.
Indeed. Noted. Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's a great reminder in general. Working with your GAP project officers, oftentimes we defer to the communication styles, or at least that's how we interpret it of our grantees. But regular communication cannot be overstated. Like the importance of regular communication cannot be overstated. And again, just to make a plug, actively engage with your project officer on the end of year process and what your preferences are and what you expect of the project officer. The point of this whole process is this is a joint evaluation, and that this is and GAP too, to step back for a second, these are not grants, they're cooperative agreements. And so it's a little bit different. That's probably a whole nother presentation, but we want, the communication that you expect and deserve to be communicated to your GAP project officer. So thanks, Jacob. Yep. Next group. It's okay. We can continue to go just for a few more minutes. 5 more minutes. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Next group.
Where's what do you want me to say?
Where you want? You got the floor.
For number one, for change, I think more training.
Was that I didn't hear?
Training in all aspects, I think would help with the end of year report. For especially the new project officers, so they have an understanding where each tribe has their own perspective, and I think that's what the new project officers need to learn. And for what works well is the consistency of having the same project officer. For number two, is just listen and relate to the issues of each individual tribe, because we don't feel that one shoe fits all. And number three is why change what's working well, we feel.
Okay.
And number four, again, it's working well now. So I think we have to be consistent with what we know.
Okay.
And number five is
Maybe, maybe. Can we get a maybe from you? No. Thank you for that. Also, I would just like to say, if you like working with your current GAP project officer, let it be known to our manager. If he does not have that information, he may transfer us to a different grantee for whatever reason. So if you like your project officer, let it be known. And then the final group.
Nico, why did you hand the mic to me? Oh, thank you. So, all right, so we need to wrap up quickly here. That's another reason not to give me the mic. We didn't actually go down directly through every question. We just had a lot of really good open discussion here about stuff. There was one of the initial questions that was asked by a couple of people were, well, really, what is a deliverable? So really defining that early on. And like one of my thoughts is you really set up your whole end of year evaluation process when you draft your work plan. And I used to really get myself in trouble by being very specific on my deliverables and over promising on my deliverables. I will have a final report done when maybe, okay, I can't control whether a final report is actually done. I can draft a report, I can give it to council, but if council doesn't turn it into a final, and then my deliverable is unmet. And so you can, when you're writing your work plan, you're setting up your end of year right then. There was a really good comment by one of the members of this group that was saying that you should really start your end of year more in your third quarter. Before your work plan is ever done, go over where you are in your work plan and see, and if you are not getting things, if you have not accomplished something, you still have a little bit more time to actually accomplish it. Some of us at the table actually have the same project officer, and that project officer is very open in sharing documentation. And that project officer has a OneDrive that is set up with all of the documents for that particular tribe that are in a folder in OneDrive. And that project officer makes it very open to his grantees, their grantees, to let them know exactly what documents he has and what's been reported. And that open sharing was very much appreciated by people. And then the tribe kind of doing their own initial evaluation on themselves and kind of starting off that process. Did you want to mention on any of those things there?
Where did you kind of leave off at? 4? For 4, maybe having like quarterly comments that your project officer provides you after your quarterly reports to kind of just mention or keep you on track after each quarter would be nice, instead of just sending out your quarterly reports and then just proceeding with the year and then kind of getting to the end of the year of like trying to evaluate it all at once. So that would be helpful. And then, yeah, 5. So yeah, we're good.
Good job. Good job. Excellent.
Thank you.
No, thank you everyone for all of for your engagement, your participation. Those were great ideas. Rob brought up a couple. OneDrive, if that interests you to have shared information, let it be known to your project officer. And if you are interested in joining the subcommittee and participating in these conversations and improving the process moving forward, please let us know. Reach out to any one of us, and we would love to have you. So thank you, everyone.